Welcome to the Law Firm Practice Management Advice Podcast.
The fundamentals of business.
Join Kirk Stange of Stange Law Firm as he discusses helpful strategies, tools, and insights to grow and manage a legal practice.
Good ideas are simple.
From improving client relationships to managing your team and scaling your practice, this podcast offers practical advice for navigating the challenges of law firm management.
Shall we proceed?
Now, here's your host, Kirk Stange.
Welcome to Law Firm Practice Management Advice. We have an interesting topic today. The topic is, should your law firm be near other law firms? And this episode today is based on an article on my blog, lawfirmpracticemanagementadvice.com, and it's based on an article titled, Is Your Law Firm Near Your Competition? The date of the article is December 30th, 2023, so as a follow-up to the episode today, go on over to my blog and read that article on this topic for more information, but let's go ahead and jump on into the topic at hand. For lawyers and law firms looking to open a law office, deciding where to place that office is a very important decision. Obviously, this is one that lawyers and law firms want to think about long and hard. They want to think about it critically, not make a decision that they later regret. And when deciding where to place a law firm, what kind of space to get, there's all types of questions that lawyers and law firms have to think about and contemplate, and some of them are really obvious, okay? Obviously, the size of the space in terms of how much space you want. Do you just want to rent smaller space? Do you want very large space because you have the intention of hiring lots of people? That's an important question. Obviously, the aesthetics of the office is an important question too. Do you want Class A office space that's very expensive? Is that the vibe you're trying to bring? Or is that not really necessary? In other words, maybe Class B office space is fine. You know, maybe you practice in areas such as traffic or bankruptcy where maybe the aesthetics of the office not that big of a deal. On the other hand, if you're trying to attract high net worth clients, then maybe you need Class A space that gives that kind of vibe to potential clients that, look, you're a high-end law firm, okay? These are some of those questions that the lawyers and law firms think on the surface level, and then obviously you get into the price per square foot, the length of the lease, is it short-term, is it long-term? You know, these are all questions that are important, but in a lot of ways, I would say to the listeners, these questions are kind of surface level questions. To me, these kinds of questions are the obvious ones, the ones that most lawyers and law firms think about. But let me tell you something else which is very, very important, which you ought to think about when deciding where to place your law firm. And in my opinion, this is not something a lot of lawyers or law firms give much thought to. It's not something that they think about. To me, this is 300 and 400 level thinking in terms of where to place your law office that most lawyers, again, this is not even in their wheelhouse in terms of what they're thinking about. And so the question is, do you place your law office near your competition, near other lawyers? Is that what you ought to do? In my opinion, this is what most lawyers do, right? There's typically areas in any locality where law firms and lawyers tend to kind of congregate. You know, oftentimes it may just be a block or a few short blocks from other law firms, might be near the courthouse. And this is what most lawyers do, right? It's near the courthouse, it's in the business district where other lawyers are at. And this can be a good thing on a lot of levels. I'm not saying it isn't. You know, this is where lawyers can oftentimes, meet other lawyers and they can socialize. And they can do happy hours, and they can engage in bar association activities or social events, after work. And again, this isn't all bad. In terms of networking, maybe getting referrals from lawyers and other practice areas, maybe it makes sense to be near other lawyers and law firms. Again, the only thing I would say is this is what most individuals do when they decide where to put their law firm. And they don't even give it a second thought that there might be an alternate strategy that they ought to consider, okay? So the alternate strategy is to go somewhere different, right? To not be where other lawyers and law firms are at. To go to places that are, entirely different, that might be where the clients are at, not where other lawyers are at. It might be in areas where, ultimately, there's other business people congregated just besides lawyers, okay? So again, the debate is, do you put your law office near other lawyers where other lawyers congregate, or do you go someplace totally different, okay? And that's the topic at hand. Again, there's not necessarily a right answer. There's not necessarily a wrong answer. Different lawyers and law firms are going to do this a little bit differently, but because most lawyers and law firms just go with the flow and they go where other lawyers are at, let me paint you a potential advantage in terms of going someplace different, okay? Look, if you're in the same part of town as other lawyers and law firms, and particularly other lawyers and law firms that practice in your same exact area of law, you're placing yourself near your competition, okay? And so in a way, these potential clients could set multiple appointments with multiple lawyers, and they could do it the same day because everybody's just in the same building or they're in a block or two away, and it's easy. Set an appointment with one lawyer at 9 a.m., set another one with another lawyer nearby at 11 a.m., right? Meet somebody else at 1 p.m. nearby. It makes it very easy to do that. So in a way, if you're placing yourself near other lawyers and law firms, I guess it can be good from the perspective that some potential clients are going to think, look, this is where lawyers are at, and lawyers who are successful are in this part of town. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, you might make it easier for people to window shop with a bunch of other lawyers and law firms because you're right near everybody else, okay? So contemplate, does it make sense going someplace else, away from the crowd, separating yourself, being in a place where other lawyers and law firms are not at, because, again, at that point, potential client, if they're coming to see you, it's not going to be a deal where they're going to be able to set a bunch of other appointments with other lawyers or law firms nearby. I mean, I guess they can, but they're going to have to jump in the car and drive someplace else, okay? So think about that. Maybe it makes sense to be off the grid, be someplace different. Maybe you don't need to be right near the courthouse, right near all the other lawyers in town. Maybe being someplace different could have its advantages. Look, and then another consideration I think lawyers and law firms ought to think about and ought to look at long and hard is look at the client list and see where the clients are generally coming from, right? Where are your clients coming from? What part of town? And obviously in different cities, different states, this is going to be different, but if your clientele are coming from a certain part of town, maybe it makes sense to put your law office there, right? Because then theoretically you're attracting more clients to your law firm, and you're making it easier for them because versus having to travel to some business district or some area near the courthouse, you're where your potential clients are at. So it's easier for them to come to you and hire you, right? Definitely another consideration. Again, this is an interesting question. I think it's one that not a lot of lawyers and law firms think about. There's not a right or wrong answer. Certainly a lot of lawyers and law firms would even hear this podcast and just say, listen, I'm going to be near other lawyers and law firms, because of the bar events, the social events, and these kinds of things, the convenience of the court. And again, those could all be good reasons to do that. But, there can be some value in being different, doing things differently, and setting up your law office in a place where your clients are actually at. And that makes it more convenient for them. And then you're not in an office building, let's say, or on a block where there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other lawyers or law firms doing the exact same thing you're doing, which ultimately could lead to less retentions and more competition, and it might be harder on you again. So again, no right or wrong answer. I know a lot of lawyers and law firms are going to be near everybody else, and that's fine. But for those of you looking to be different, maybe don't do that. Or at least maybe think about doing something different. Consider it and explore it. I thought this was an interesting topic, and I wanted to cover it. today, because I think this is kind of outside the box thinking that lots of lawyers and law firms don't engage in, all right? So that's the topic today. Again, as a follow-up to the episode today, go on over to lawfirmpracticemanagementadvice.com. Read my article titled, Is Your Location Near Your Competition? The date of the article is December 30th, 2023. At least this will give you something to think about. All right, thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned to our next episode on Law Firm Practice Management Advice coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Practice Management Advice Podcast with Kirk Stange. Kirk Stange is the president and founding partner of Stange Law Firm, a multi-state divorce and family law practice. For more insight on similar law firm management topics, visit his practice management advice blog at lawfirmpracticemanagementadvice.com.